Welcome to Film Market Hub Talks. Today we're going to talk documentary with Annabel Wigoder, who is the head of development at Salon Pictures in London. Salon are the creators of feature film, documentary, TV series and branded content, and they're perhaps most famous for their double BAFTA-nominated documentary McQueen. And welcome Annabel. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
Could you start by telling us a little bit about your own career path and how you end up working at Salon?
Sure. So before Salon, I worked primarily in scripted, actually in drama and film, but on a couple of biopics. So we did a Cold War film and a Charles Dickens film. So I'd done various things in the kind of true story space. And I thought Salon looked really interesting because they did, as you said, they do films and docs, but they had a kind of background in taking true stories and telling them across film and documentary, which I really liked. So they'd done Churchill, they'd done a film about Paul Gascoigne, the footballer, lots of interesting stuff. And, it was quite an interesting chance to work across both mediums. So I took it and then realised pretty early on that actually the two are quite similar. I mean, the elements of storytelling are exactly the same. It's just the process is totally different. So once you get your head around the fact that you're not working to a script, you're just going to spend forever in the edit trying to make the script afterwards. It all kind of works the same way.
Absolutely. And what specific documentary films have you been involved in Salon?
So since I've been at Salon, I think we've probably released 10 documentaries in the last 4 years, I'd say, I guess. Plus features and some music videos and branded content and stuff. So when I started, McQueen had just started. So I was lucky enough to get to see that process, I guess, without being heavily involved because it was all up and running.
Yes.
But to kind of watch the genesis of it and watch early cuts and just have that really nice moment where you're in a screening room and everyone sort of realizes that it's really good. And then so that's probably Salon's biggest release so far. And then since then, we've done various bits of things. Last year we released an Audrey Hepburn doc, which is on Netflix in America, and Sky and Amazon over here, which I did. So that was amazing. We did it with her family, with a young up and coming female director. Just a big biopic piece that no one had really done before. Currently, the thing I'm working on is a doc about Nicola Adams, the two-time Olympic gold medalist boxer from Leeds, which is going to be an Amazon original. So a mix of stuff really. I think I've tended to do weirdly the docs about women, and my two colleagues who are men have tended to do the docs about men. But actually, everything we've got coming up now seems to be quite female focused, which is nice.
That's great.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It's just kind of that's the way the cards have fallen, but it's great for me.
Yeah, brilliant. And just coming to, as you said, you've worked across both scripted and unscripted. When we're talking about documentary, what would you say are the components of a great documentary? What do you look for?
I mean, it's a tricky question, isn't it? Because every documentary is so different. And, you get pitched stuff through the whole range. It will be, an Audrey Hepburn type piece about a household name, or it will be, a really little known story about a band or something, or something around social justice. And all those things require different elements. Yeah, always a good story, really. But that, I know that's such a broad... That's such a broad thing to say, isn't it? But I think it's got to be something interesting. I think, and there's got to be a point to it. I mean, sometimes we get, we've all got Google, so any of us can find Wikipedia and find, Audrey Hepburn or find Nicola Adams or whatever, and just regurgitate that and say, right, here's the life story. But that's not enough, especially not these days. I think you've got to have a point or a truth you're trying to get to with it. So with Audrey. Although, yes, it is quite a conventional start to finish telling of her life, it's actually a story about love. And the director was really keen on doing that from the very beginning. It was a story about a woman who had lacked love in every area of her life, was chasing love everywhere, never found it, and finally only found satisfaction in loving others. So it actually had a kind of a filmic it had the spine of that story was maybe more what you expect in a feature film, a scripted film, but actually it works really well. So that with that one, the director had a really clear take on what she wanted to do, and it wasn't just birth to death. But obviously that only works in certain cases. If you've got a celebrity or a household name or something like that. I think, if you're maybe, if you're pitching us a social justice story or a political story or something like 13th, there's just got to be a clear truth that you're revealing and a purpose for doing so. And then on a practical level, access is always really helpful. I mean, look, it's hard to get, but it's tricky when somebody comes to us with just a person. I think we should do this, and we go, well, yeah, we also would like to do this, but for example, share or something. We go, we all want to do share, but how do we get to share? And we don't expect writers or directors. I mean, it's great if they have already made contact, but obviously I understand that actually it can be easier to make contact when you're saying, right, I'm doing it with X production company. But what you can do is you can at least find out, who's alive, who you can be speaking to. With AUDREY, we found her son was alive. You can do, if you're a writer or a director and you're serious about your pitch, you can do a little bit of early producing, just in the sense that you can at least find out, here are the 20 contributors or the 10 contributors that are alive. I found their details here. I haven't been in touch with them, but we could, because I guess it's just if it's an obvious subject or a famous person, it's just about presenting us with a pitch that's slightly more developed than what we could do if we found that person online and did a little bit of digging. And yeah, if it's social justice or something, who are the journalists you're going to speak to? Who are the politicians who are at least have some ideas for that too, as well as just the story?
That's great. You've almost answered my next question, because I was going to say, which is great, what do you look for in a pitch and what grabs your attention? But I think you've kind of, like, just to recap, you're talking about kind of having a great angle, having perhaps a different angle on a story that's well known, or having an access, or having done some, having done some homework and digging around about.
Yeah, having an idea of access, I think, is really helpful. Because actually, we're so lucky to live in an age with Google where you can find so much, and I think most of the docs that we've done, for example, the famous people ones are different, but for example, we did a true crime doc, an Australian miscarriage of justice series, which is going to be on Sky later this year. And the director for that, he came to us, he'd read a book about the story, and he'd written a really good 10-page book, but he'd also got in touch with the journalist who'd written the book, and he'd found out that the main character, who was wrongly sent for prison, he'd found him on Facebook, and he found his wife, and he found his kids, and he kind of knew that, okay, actually there is going to be here's what the story I want to tell, and here is the way I think we can actually do it, which I think it's interesting, because it's not just they've done a bit of homework, but it's also they've thought ahead about who's going to tell the story. And if you're a writer or director, that's quite important, because it makes a huge difference if it's a journalist telling your story, or if it's a son telling your story, or if it's that's part of telling the story in itself, having a think about that.
Absolutely.
And obviously one thing that is always amazing, I know this is so rare, but archive, if you happen to, if it's someone who's got home movie footage or photos, you can come, this you can be, we've been pitched some documentaries for, I found this amazing character in the 1600s, and I kind of go, we can't do anything with that. I mean, maybe we could if you had some brilliant idea for how you were going to show us that on screen, but it's pretty hard. So, generally if that is, we've had directors and writers come to us and go, actually, I've made contact with X famous / interesting person, and she's got 5 hours of home movie footage, and you kind of go, well, that's amazing, probably want to do it, whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely. And any other really practical tips for filmmakers, directors, writers, producers who are going to be putting together a documentary pitch? What do you look for, and any advice on the sort of length, style? What do you like to see when you're kind of reading a pitch?
We get so many different ones. I'd say probably I mean, I think the McQueen sales document was something mad, like 80 pages or something, but please don't do that. I mean, it looked incredible, but if it's just a pitch, I think it's, maybe 10 pages is more than enough, I'm sure. But yeah, just a good sense of the story from start to finish. And look, that can be tricky if your story is something that's ongoing. But the best pitches, even if it is something that's ongoing, they've thought about, okay, well, look, if we find X, then this is the end. If we don't find X, then this is the end. What is your end going to be if one of those films where you're trying to trace someone or something. We don't want to be pitched anything that's totally open-ended, because nobody wants to watch that. And I think if you in your gut instinct think it will be open-ended, then what other story strands are you going to close around that to make it feel complete? I think that's quite important, just having an idea for the whole story. And then, definitely having a think about contributors, who's alive, who can you speak to, or, what secondary talking heads type people can you speak to if it's that kind of story, if it's journalists or celebrities or anything like that. And then, I suppose you can have a look further. What kind of archive is there? You can have a little dig on the internet, see. And I think sometimes if you're a director, it's different if you're a writer. If you're a director, it's really nice to have an idea of how it will look and feel. If you're a writer, obviously, I don't think you really need to do that, because if anything, that can be off-putting to a director. But if you're a director, most directors are great at doing pictures anyway, but really starkly shot, talking to camera, or is it going to be, really colourful and busy, or are you going to use animation, or are you going to use, give us a sense of how it's going to feel.
Super. Fantastic. And when you've worked on scripted and unscripted, so what do you think makes a particular story the right fit for documentary? I know obviously some stories can be spread across both the documentary medium and go into a scripted format as well. But is there a particular type of story you think is particularly good for documentary?
I guess one difference is if you're going to do a birth to death true story, that's a lot easier in documentary than it is in film. Whereas film works much better with, a moment in time, a month or a year or something. But no, I think, look, in general, any true story can be a documentary if you've got a good take on it. You can make something amazing out of, somebody pitched us something the other day that was, he'd been filming a family member for years and years, and it was really small, but, it tapped into kind of, over the pandemic, it tapped into these themes of love and loss and family, and I just thought that kind of thing was really interesting. So you just don't know. On the other hand, you can have, you can want to do a brilliantly big idea and you can just not manage to grasp how to make that into a good film. So I think it's just about you, as a director or a writer, the same way that you would write a script, shaping that story to make it into something worth telling.
Great. And we are so excited about doing, at the moment, we have this Pitch to Pro call open for documentary films for Salon Pictures, for both documentary feature films, documentary series. And that call is going to be open until the 9th of June. So for anyone watching this, if you have a documentary project, either a series or a feature film, please check out the call section of the Film Market Hub website, where you'll be able to find out all the information about that. This is a bespoke call just for Salon Pictures. So if you want the opportunity to pitch to Salon, please check out that call. And Annabel, just a little bit about this call. Any particular projects you've got on your radar at the moment that you're looking for across, for Salon? Anything, any sort of particular type of story that you're hoping to receive?
So we're only a really small company, so we tend to be quite market led. We will speak to the buyers and speak to the channels and speak to the commissioners and see what kind of thing they're looking for. I mean, at the moment, the stuff that is doing really well is crime, still. The genre that never dies, but I think it's got to be interesting crime. I think people have seen, there's been such a glut, hasn't there? There's been so much good crime, and you can tell pretty quickly if it's going to be worth your time or not. But there's things like The Ripper on Netflix. That's such an old story, and there's been so many docs, but they found a new angle in about the women. So I think crime is always interesting. Sports, people are always interested in. especially if there's a really interesting character, like, for example, our Nicola Adams doc, or maybe an unlikely sports story and the main people are still alive, and something that maybe became bigger than a small story. I think sports is always really good. Scandals, I think, from the fun scandals like Fire Island and things like that, to the darker, bleaker scandals, Travesty of Justices, or films like The Dissident, things like that. I think those always make really, really good films. Music, always, but the thing about music is you've got to have the access. We get pitched a lot of documentaries that are just ideas for a band or a singer, and we just go, well, we can't. It's just, just because we're a fairly big documentary production company, it's still getting that access is so difficult. So I think for music, unless you've got a personal connection or have a genuine reason to think you can get to that person, that's really tricky. But look, I think those are kind of the main genres we're looking for, but we consider everything, really, because you just don't know. The only thing we're unlikely to do is very, very small British stories, because actually to finance documentaries, we find that we need to raise the money in different countries. And if it's an ultra British story that just has no audience outside the UK, it's probably not for us. It's probably one to take to a Channel 4, a broadcaster or something, but not for us. But if you find a British story that seems like a small British story, but actually widens out into something much bigger, say you did the Brixton riots or something, and you managed to widen it out into the George Floyd protests and everything else that's going on, that would be the way to do something like that. But if it really is a tiny story about I don't know, like a tiny fishing village in England that doesn't go wider, it could be a great film, but it's still not probably one for us.
Finally, who should submit? You've said before that you work with new filmmakers, new directors, new writers. Are you open to receiving submissions from emerging talent?
Definitely, completely, yeah. I mean, look, when we did the Audrey Hepburn doc that we did, we'd done one previous doc with the same director, which is a very small, very low budget documentary about a car designer. But prior to that, she'd only done some shorts. So yeah, I think there's always room to take a punt on people. If they've done some good shorts, they've got a good idea, and if they are good enough, I think. So I think it's all documentary filmmakers is ideal, really. But then I think writers too, because realistically, you're seeing a lot of doc films credits. They will often say, directed by this person, written by this person. And okay, that person's not writing a script, but they're writing in the sense that they're crafting a story. So if you're a writer, you're still crafting a story on the page. You can still have a look for that access or that possible access as part of that writing, pitching process. And you can even have some director ideas if you want, but you can, it's not too difficult to find a director if you've got a really strong proposal. So yeah, if you're a writer and you have a fantastic idea for a documentary, don't feel that you also have to be a director to send it to us, because we will be able to find a director if your idea is good enough. But then again, I guess if you are a writer, we're going to have to find a director that's kind of amenable to working in that two-person collaborative way. But a lot of people are, especially in documentary. A lot of times the editor will get the writer credit because actually they're the person that's in the room using that material to tell the story. So yeah, directors or writers, we're open. If it's a good idea, we want to see it.
Fantastic. And finally, why do you think documentaries are so important in our current climate?
Well, look, I think on a practical level, they're a lot easier to make at the moment because they're such small crews. We shut down effectively like everyone else during the first lockdown, but then the rest of the time we've been able to shoot because some of these are just 3 people in a room, which is a lot easier to keep COVID safe. And then look, I think that it's funny because I want to say that it's important to tell true stories and raise awareness of certain things, but then again, documentary is still subjective. You're never ever going to get a totally accurate retelling. Everyone's got a bit of an angle on something, but either way, I think look, they can be amazing for. Yeah, I mean, look at The Dissident. that was a really compelling, horrible telling of that story, but so eye-opening. And then, films like Notes on Blindness or Crip Camp, those kind of films, which are just brilliant, and I think completely found a really creative way to express those experiences of disability in a really interesting way that maybe definitely for me, I found it really eye-opening. So I think documentaries like that can be really interesting because, yeah, you can do it in film, but it's always going to be more compelling when it's a real person telling their story.
Definitely. Well, Annabel, thank you so much for joining us today. This has been absolutely fantastic content and great insight. And Salon is such an exciting company to be partnering with. So yeah, we're really excited about this pitch to pro for you, and very much look forward to receiving the submissions from anyone who's watching. We wish you every success on your current projects. It sounds like you're going to be producing lots of exciting films in the near future. And again, in this time, it's such, as you said, with COVID, it's a great opportunity for documentaries to flourish, really.
It really is. And look, I would love, it would be great if we found something through this process, because I'm hoping it just introduces us to a handful of new voices, new faces, new voices, and something will come out of that.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. And we'll hopefully see you again soon.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was absolutely brilliant. Like really, really inspiring to hear the whole process as well. I've always been fascinated by that, actually, how the editors in documentary, they really are the scripters, aren't they? Because they are. It's amazing how in different mediums it really is. Like in TV and film, how the writer is, the script is so key, obviously.
And some documentary directors, I've found some do script their films before they start.
Yeah.
Some do, some don't. I mean, they're never going to get that exact script, but a lot of people do go through that same writing process.
Yeah.
At the beginning.
And then other ones, I guess it's depending on the story. You just have to fly with the story with the camera and then piece it all together afterwards, because you don't know what you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly. Which is what normally happens. Yeah.